Two men in fake badges showed up at a homeowner's door, demanding he hand over his firearms. They claimed to be HOA law enforcement, but what they didn't know was who they were dealing with. This wasn't just any homeowner. He was a decorated veteran, and when they pushed too far, he unleashed military protocol that left the entire HOA trembling. In a quiet, gated community stood a brick house with an American flag waving proudly out front. It belonged to James Walker, a 45-year-old retired Army major. James was a man of discipline. He woke early, ran each morning, and lived simply despite having seen more chaos than most could imagine. His home was his fortress of peace. Inside his safe he kept firearms, not for violence but for security. They were legally registered, maintained with care and locked away. To James, they were part of his duty as a protector of his family. But to the HOA of Maplewood Estates, James was a problem. The Maplewood HOA, led by Gregory Allen, had a reputation for overreach. They fined neighbors for bird feeders, banned garden gnomes, and even measured grass with rulers. But Gregory had an agenda. He didn't like James. Maybe it was envy, maybe it was bias, or maybe it was because James never bowed to his petty rules. So Gregory cooked up a plan. He whispered rumors. That veteran stockpiles weapons. He's dangerous to the neighborhood. Something must be done. And then one evening, Gregory's plan arrived on James's doorstep, in the form of two men pretending to be law enforcement. It was late afternoon when James heard the knock. Opening the door, he was met by two burly men in dark uniforms. Their shirts had patches stitched with HOA Enforcement Division. "Mr. Walker," one said firmly, "we're here on official business. We've had reports you're storing firearms. HOA regulations prohibit weapons. Hand them over immediately." James narrowed his eyes. "HOA regulations don't override federal or state law. And you're not law enforcement." The second man flashed a cheap badge. "We have the authority to seize property. Failure to comply will result in removal from the community." Neighbors peeked from windows. To the untrained eye, the men looked official. But to James, every detail screamed fake. No insignia, mismatched gear, and nervous eyes. James didn't panic. He didn't argue. He simply said, "Wait here." He shut the door, walked calmly into his study, and activated a military protocol system he had built into his home. Security cameras streaming, voice recorders capturing every word, and an emergency line connecting to his former unit. Then he returned to the door. "You've made a mistake," James said evenly. "You have 5 minutes to leave before this becomes very serious." The men smirked. "You think you can threaten us?" James's lips curved into a faint smile. "Not a threat. Fair promise." Exactly 5 minutes later, headlights filled the cul-de-sac. A convoy of black SUVs rolled up, and out stepped men in tactical gear. James's former brothers-in-arms, now working in private security. They were there within minutes, summoned through a silent distress signal James had activated. The impostors stiffened. Their smugness drained as real professionals surrounded them. One operative barked, "Badges now!" The impostors stuttered. Their flimsy badges glinted under the camera lights. Within seconds, the operatives had them restrained. "Commander," one said to James, "what do you want done with them?" James's voice was calm. "We'll let the real police handle it." When the local sheriff's deputies arrived, the impostors' scheme unraveled. They weren't officers. They weren't even HOA employees. They were hired muscle, sent by Gregory Allen, the HOA president. Gregory had told them to intimidate James, hoping he'd hand over his firearms or leave the community altogether. But now, the plan had backfired spectacularly. Gregory was exposed. James's security footage showed everything. The fake badges, the threats, the demand to seize guns. Neighbors who once believed Gregory's rumors now saw the truth. Lawsuits poured in, impersonating law enforcement, harassment, conspiracy. The HOA board voted Gregory out in disgrace. The impostors faced felony charges, and James, he stood taller than ever. Weeks later, James returned to his peaceful routines. His flag still waved proudly, his safe still locked, and his family safe under his watch. Neighbors who had once doubted him now saluted him, some even apologizing for believing Gregory's lies. James never gloated. He never rubbed it in. He simply lived with quiet dignity, knowing that when pushed he had stood his ground, and not with rage but with discipline. Arrogance blinds the corrupt. The HOA thought they could bend the law, send impostors, and intimidate a man of honor. But real strength doesn't come from fake badges or empty threats. It comes from discipline, truth, and the courage to stand firm. And when James unleashed military protocol, the HOA learned one lesson they'll never forget. Never try to seize what you don't have the right to take.